Welcome to this webinar. This is our very first webinar as the Data Visualization Society London group. So we're very happy to have you here, and we're joined by 5 wonderful speakers. So you're in for a treat. We're going to be discussing women in data visualization and careers for women in data visualization. Guess I will introduce DVS, or the Data Visualization Society, for anybody who's not aware of who we are. DVS is a community for data enthusiasts who promote the effective and responsible use of data visualization through education and networking. We have thousands of members across the globe, and we have little local groups such as this one, the London group, like in different cities and in different countries. And we host events or do networking sessions and give opportunities to people who are interested in data visualization to know a bit more about the field, but also to create community and just gather these groups of enthusiasts. So if this is the first time that you're hearing about DVS, feel free to become a member, absolutely for free. We also have like paid memberships, but that is completely optional. You can also join the Slack channel to engage with other members of the community. And my co-organizers for the London group are going to be popping in some links in the chat for anybody who's interested. Through the session, feel free to ask questions through the Q&A functionality, and you're also free to type anything you want in the chat for us to discuss. So let's get started. Before I formally introduce the session, I just wanted to say a quick thanks to Astrato Analytics, who is the sponsor of this particular webinar. They provide data analysis services to help businesses optimize their performance and make informed decisions based on their data. So thank you so much for providing the space today. So, as I said at the very beginning, we are going to be discussing careers for women in data and women in data visualization. And this is a predominantly male field, so we wanted to give space for women in the area to discuss their experiences, their obstacles, and even their the opportunities that they've had, and some of like their stories and journeys. And we have 5 wonderful speakers with us today. They're going to be sharing all their experiences, and I'm just going to be here asking a few questions, moderating a little bit, but really it's a conversation that they are going to be having amongst themselves. So to get started, I'm just going to read a little bit of the bio for each of our speakers. First, we have Kinnari Ladha. She's a senior executive leader with over 20 years of experience. She has expertise in data strategy and transformation across multiple industries, including telecommunications, retail, travel, and more. Marie Segger is a data journalist for The Economist. She has written on subjects like inequality, politics, and cultural trends, and she provides talks and guest lectures about journalism, data, and social media. Tiziana Alocci is an information designer and data artist known for her unique style and international collaborations. She is a TEDx speaker and an associate lecturer at the University of the Arts London. Elizabeth Tofany is a mathematician, statistician, and data visualization developer, specializing in analyzing complex data sets. She is known for her visually compelling graphics, dashboards, and data apps, and she works as a data visualization developer at Vizlib. And last but certainly not least, we have Nastasia Findley. She leads the product analysis function at the Telegraph Media Group, and she manages a team of specialists to inform the strategic direction of products at the Telegraph, focusing on aligning metrics to business strategy. So welcome to every single one of you. Thank you so much for joining us today. We're super excited to have you. And the first question, and as I said, this is a conversation, so feel free to engage, interrupt, change the topic whenever you want. People in the chat as well, ask us questions. We want to know what you're thinking as well. The first question to get everything started, I want to ask each one of you is, what inspired you to pursue a career in data visualization? And any takers to get started?
Okay, shall I go first? Since you introduced me first.
Yeah.
So my career is across data visualization, analytics, and insight. I've always been a numbers geek at an early age. I was very good at maths at school, and then decided to study it further at university. I began my corporate journey as a hands-on practitioner. So I was a coder, coding in languages like SQL and SAS, which no longer exist anymore. But I was fascinated with all the customer data organizations could see and collect. And obviously along the way, learned how valuable data was to organizations to make the right decisions. And that's what sort of propelled my career. And along the journey, I've had opportunities to move away from data, but I never have. I'm quite passionate about the industry and just stayed true to my values.
Amazing. Anybody want to go next?
I can. Oh, you go, Marie. Sorry.
I think my my kind of history is quite similar to that. So yeah, I really enjoyed working with numbers, and even though I went on to study English and communication at university, so nothing really number based, but communications had a lot of statistics in it, and when that course ended 2 years in, I was really disappointed. So I figured I needed to do something in my job that combined both my love for languages and for numbers, and that's how I landed in data journalism.
Amazing. Tiziana, do you want to go next?
Yeah, so I think my background is slightly different. I have a background in fine art and industrial design. So my approach to data visualization comes from the design world. I never been very good with numbers, to be honest, but either with words. So I always find the visual medium the best way for me to express what I wanted to say. And then by accident, I found out about the course in communication design at Polytechnic of Milan. And I started, was 10, 12 years ago, probably. The data visualization, it wasn't so popular back at the time. So I started with a very specific focus linked to design and what is now data art. So I believe I belong a little bit more to the world of data visualization linked to that side of visualizing data, not strictly to analytics.
Amazing.
I can go next. I think my interest in data kind of started at school, I guess, just interested in computers and anything to do with anything I could do on the laptop. I then went to study philosophy at university, actually, so it's not so related, but when I finished the degree, they gave you a little pamphlet that said all of the skills that you'd learned in your degree, and one of them was analyst. So I readily got to looking at graduate analyst jobs and ended up finding one that accepted a philosophy graduate. So but yeah, I've been very happy where I landed. Similar to you, Kinnari, sort of don't see myself straying from data now that I'm involved in it. I just find it such a great place where you can bring skills from different areas. You've got the communications in there and you've got the analytics, and they just come together really well. So yeah, that's a bit of history from me.
Great.
And then I have a similar story. Started in the school years. I did pure math first and then statistics. And I found for me learning those concepts, I had to have a visualization. I had to have a drawing, a sketch. I needed to be able to see it to learn it. And then I found that was my way to express it back. So when I needed to explain something to someone, I was always drawing madly on a whiteboard or something. So I think as projects came up that needed a visualization component to them, I always signed myself up for those, and then that's led me here.
Amazing. Thank you all so much for sharing that. That is incredibly interesting. And I can see the common element, it seems to be communicating, right? Like trying to express something that either numbers or words are not enough. And you all went for the visual route, which is amazing to see. I'm sure many people can identify to that. Then, of course, the focus here is about women and women in the industry. So I do want to know whether you agree with the statement that there is a gender divide in the field, that it's a male-dominated field, and how have you personally experienced that through your careers? And again, any takers, just have at it.
Okay, I can go. So I've had a long career in data. So I've been working in data for 20 years. So there's probably a long list of things I can talk about in challenges, but I'll talk about some of the sort of significant ones in my career that have been quite unique to me being a woman in data. So I've always been quite ambitious and driven in my career. And I believe in it, everyone should have equal opportunities. However, when I moved into more senior roles, I started to notice that I was either the only female or only person of sort of, colour around the leadership table. And that got more prominent as I took on more senior leadership roles as well. What I saw a couple of times was some of my male peers were given opportunities that weren't present to me or available to me. I found this quite difficult to accept and took it as a personal quest to ensure I always presented myself or push for the same opportunities at work and worked extra hard to prove my worth. And that shouldn't be the case. But when I was sort of in my career, there weren't really, any female really like role models because there weren't really many females in data at that stage. So I tend to look at female leaders in other areas of the business. But also I think I've got 2 young children. I remember going for an interview and one of the hiring managers asked me about childcare. I mean, you wouldn't expect that now, but this was about 10 years ago. I was quite surprised, but obviously I answered it. But looking back now, I think that's something you wouldn't expect anyone to answer, And I think when I got into board level roles in previous organisations, there was very much an old boys club mentality, and there were lots of inappropriate comments and questions. And I was quite confident in, and I would pull them out. But I think, thinking back now, actually, if there was a young, woman in data in that situation, not as confident as me, then I think you realise you've got a role to play here. You can be the change. And I think every one of us has got to remember that. So if you hear something that you think is wrong, we should always call it out and don't think it's someone else's problem, because it could be someone else in a situation that may not be as confident as you. So some of the sort of challenges that I face in my career as I progress through.
Thank you for sharing that. Super interesting. Anybody want to jump on that as well?
I can chip in. So I've worked both in studios as permanent, and now I'm a freelancer and I have my own practice. So I've seen a little bit of both, but also teach data visualization. And I'm always curious to notice that in 99% of the cases, the classes are made by women. So there is an imbalance on the other side when it comes to education. But then when you land in a professional environment, it's still a male-dominated industry. I work in design mainly, and most of the time I've been the only female designer in the team. It has changed, definitely. I can see that the situation is improving. I see more senior roles covered by women. But there is still a long way to go. And I never understood why there are so many female in education studying this discipline, but not as many in the professional world.
Oh, yeah, really interesting, especially the divide there between education and practice. Anastasia, Elizabeth, Marie, any?
Yeah, I was just thinking, I feel like I've benefited to some extent from sort of the difficulties that you may have faced, in your career so far. I definitely think in my experience, there's been more of a split. There's definitely still more men than women in any team that I've been in, but there's a feeling like people would like there to be more women there, rather than sort of not wanting any shifts. So there's sort of often conversations of, there's a bit of an imbalance going on. It'd be nice to fix that. So yeah, I think generally there's a bit more of a motivation to have more women in data. I think, out of my friends, I'm probably the only woman I know that would want a career in data, but that's just that's not to say that it's sort of applies generally. I think I feel positive about how that will progress and how it will become more of a thing that people approach. I think that this country as well, it has quite an open ability to find opportunities to transfer. So I did a philosophy degree, and I managed to find a company that did accept me to be in a non, philosophy role, a data role, in fact. So yeah, I think this country more than others accept that migration between different ones, and I think often there is a doubt for females when they're applying for roles and I think this is sort of an accepted thing, that they won't go for roles that are ahead of what they're already doing, less so than a man will. So I think, yeah, it's a lot about encouraging people, writing in job descriptions, even, you don't have to have this role already. This could be a step change for you. So making, that more obvious, I think that that would help. But yeah, I guess I'd say I've seen in my experience a bit more of a conversation about the fact that, and an awareness of the fact that there are fewer women, and that's not necessarily a positive thing.
On that note, I'm sorry to cut anybody off who wanted to jump in. We just have a question in the Q&A from Terry, and they're asking, do you think the bottleneck between students of data and finding a job has to do with unfair hiring practices, or are there less women applying? Seems like a strange imbalance. And I'm aware none of us are like, as far as I know, experts in, I don't know, sociology or like other dynamics. So I'm not expecting like a very scientific answer, but just maybe your thoughts or even your experiences, any sort of anecdotes you may have from colleagues or people going through this journey of learning the skills, but perhaps not having the opportunity to landing them in their jobs.
I mean, for me, who's recruited quite a significant number of roles in this field, I find there's never enough applicants in terms of women. Now, it could be the way in which these job specs are put out. Are they using the right sort of media? Are they making sure they're, at the right networking events to start promoting these careers? They're probably not. So I think it's down to the organisation to make sure when they're advertising for these roles, like someone mentioned earlier, is the job spec written the right way? Is it attracting that talent? I think there's a couple of things that you can work with your people team to make sure that process is in place. But there is something around not at every level. I find you just don't get that. You get 1 out of every 10 application I see is a woman. So it's really hard when you're trying to find that balance.
Wow. I'm curious, maybe, because I think perhaps Nastasia, Elizabeth, and Kinnari have like similar analyst profiles, but Marie, maybe in the newsroom, is it different? What have you experienced? And as well in design studios, Tiziana, if you can share that as well.
I would say that I guess because it's journalism, we do get more applications from women than perhaps in the like pure data analysis roles. I wouldn't say they're 50-50. I think we still get more applications from men, but I'm not a hiring manager, so I'm not directly involved in hiring. I would say that since I joined The Economist, which was in 2017, our team has grown a lot, partly because of COVID and the increase in kind of interest in data storytelling and data visualization. So our team has grown a lot, and I think become more diverse, more gender balanced. So yeah, when I started, we only had 1 female data journalist, 2, but one of them was kind of working on sort of second separate project, one of the more business focused projects of The Economist, not really writing so much for the paper and for online. So yeah, and now we're many more. So yeah, things are changing in my perspective. I think one important thing is kind of the next step, so career development, I think, is still really difficult and really different for women. I mean, if I think about data journalism, the data journalism scene, and who's the head of data journalism, it's almost only men in the UK. So that's a sad reality, I think.
I agree. If I may follow up on what Marie said, there is clearly a barrier to access to the workspace already, but career development, it's even harder. I don't know what it's down to. I may guess probably we generally talk not enough about money, about salary, about transparency in how much we get paid. There is still this taboo in talking about how much money we make. I guess if we all start to be more transparent and just chatting about our salary, about our day rate, if you're a freelancer with your fellow male co-workers, it will be much more easier to then negotiate a fair salary and even negotiate anything else. So it's just probably we need to normalize that kind of conversation. And it's one of the tips that I always give to my students is to talk money first and get the thing done as soon as possible.
Yeah, I think I noticed one of the questions in the chat. And by the way, there are many questions. So thank you everybody who's participating and engaging. It's really nice to have such a lively audience. That's not always the case, that's for sure. And they were asking about how to deal with this sort of obstacles, right? Like perhaps condescending managers or people trying to push you down or the money issue. So do you have any, I don't know whether to ask for an anecdote or perhaps like an actionable tip that people going through that situation or thinking about going into the professional like career world, how can they make sure that they vouch for themselves, especially if they're women, and not be pushed down?
I'd say from personal experience, if you're progressing in your career and if it's about pay or seniority or just next level of progression, prove to your organization and your manager why you think, show your ambitions, be open and clear about where you want your career to go in the organization, show your ambitions with your manager and wider, but also gather the evidence, show what you've done in the last 6 to 12 months we've been there, and ask the question, what is the next step for me? How do I achieve that? Because then they've got nowhere to hide. So I think transparency with evidence based on what you've achieved, and then where you ask openly where the gap is in terms of why they may think you're not ready or what the sort of blockers may be for you to get to the next step. I think if you have those open dialogues, it will help you. And if you think as a market rate you're being underpaid, then gather that evidence and show why you think. You can't say this company's paying this much. You have to show why you believe you're in the next range for the increase in salary, but gather that evidence. That's the only thing that's going to really help you achieve that.
Great advice. Anybody else want to share anything on that topic?
Yeah, I guess I'd just add, I think in response to salary negotiations and also communicating with people that you're having difficulty with or you feel like that they don't respect you, I think it both comes down to just communicating effectively and straightforwardly with somebody and having that internal confidence that if trusting yourself, that if it feels like it's not correct, that your judgment is correct on that. So moving forwards with having that confidence and saying, no, I think that this is the case, so therefore this deserves a conversation. I think that can be difficult for women in general. At my companies, this amazing product manager, she did a Google course, I think it's called I Am Remarkable, and it was just all about improving your confidence as a woman, and a big part of it was just making a list of reasons why you're a remarkable person, and it was just a quite life-changing thing actually to do, and just to sit down and say, no, yeah, like I'm good for all of these reasons. And you can bring that into lots of different aspects of your working day, really. And I think it does just come down to having that internal confidence and then being able to communicate effectively and just put your best foot forwards in everything, really.
Yeah, I think along those lines, like the best advice I got was don't negotiate with yourself first. So I think women especially tend to think, oh, well, I would ask for this much, but maybe I should bring that down, or I shouldn't, talk about this, and go in strong and let them negotiate with you, but don't negotiate yourself down first and start low.
Amazing. I just spotted this in the chat, and this is definitely a hot topic, is what you mentioned, Elizabeth, right? Like women maybe sometimes second guessing themselves or not seeing references and perhaps wondering whether they're enough for this or they have the knowledge. How do you fight against imposter syndrome Do you have any techniques? Do you have anything you can share with people, or how you've overcome it in the past? Because I'm sure we've all been there. We've all thought we were not in the right place and somebody made a mistake in the hiring process.
I'd say most of it's probably in your head. A lot of that comes from internal, you don't realize. I think it helps. I found it personally, it's helped to have a mentor or a coach, and they don't necessarily have to be in the field of data, because some of the questions and some of the challenges that you face that stem from imposter syndrome, it's got nothing to do with your technicality ability or your skills level, actually. So my advice would you is find yourself a mentor or a sort of coach, and then bring up some of these, because you probably realize you haven't openly talked about some of those things that are part of that imposter syndrome. You haven't actually written it down or even said it out verbally, and I think it really helps to talk about it openly. So I'd say get yourself a mentor or a coach, because it will help you on 100%. You may not even realize it exists until you start talking about it.
Amazing. We have a couple of questions from the chat, but also like on our notes on how, like, tips or things people can do if they want to transition into the data industry. And also somebody was asking specifically about Nastasia's background, given that she comes from philosophy and has ended up in a data related career. And they're asking about whether you found the lack of experience perhaps with numbers or maths to be an advantage, because maybe you're looking at things from a different perspective, or a disadvantage. So I guess it's twofold, the question, right? Like, how can people start getting into a data and data visualization field, and what skills are required to do that transition?
I guess I can start. Yeah, I saw that question in the chat as well. Yeah, I think it is an accidental advantage. I think in my role in, data analytics / strategy leaning, a lot of it does come down to, being a critical thinker and having sort of an internal voice that says, okay, that doesn't make sense because you need this information in order to say that that is the case. So having that skill from philosophy, putting together your argument, finding sources that support you, but also being able to challenge a rebuttal or, counter argument and things like this. So I think it's ended up being, positive aspect. All of this can be learnt though. And I think that is the key thing, is if you're looking for a transition or you're looking to progress even, trying to allocate some time to do a course. I did the Microsoft Professional Program in data science when I first started my career, and I think it just gave such a good benchmark, just core values of a role in data understanding that I've been able to transfer into lots of different aspects. The courses don't have to be too specific. You don't have to do one course that's just on Python or one course that's just on SQL. You can find one that's quite broad, and then it just shows that you have picked up a lot of skills in lots of different areas and that you genuinely have an interest. You're not just, applying just because you're looking for a role. You specifically have spent time already trying to understand all of the jargon that's involved in a data role, which is really what it's about, really. So yeah, I think that would be my top tip for if you're looking for a transition, is to do a course in something. Doesn't have to be too specific, it can be general, just to show that you do have interest.
Anybody else? And it can also, I see a lot of people asking about almost like a groceries list, right, of like skills that you might need to go into the field. I see some people asking specifically about the data journalist role, if they want to aspire to be a data journalist. So what should they do? I wonder, it's the same for people who want to be a developer. Like, do you have any, I guess, top 3 or top period abilities, skills, tools that you think people should definitely know if they want to start with data, and specifically data visualization?
I can say a bit about data journalism specifically. I think I know a lot of people who did a program at Columbia in America. It's called the LEAD program, and it's kind of like a summer school in data journalism, I think. They teach Python there, but it is very expensive, and I think the skills that you gain there, you can totally pick up yourself doing free courses online. So, I mean, you know, there's so many coding courses that are free, you know, R for data science, great way to start learning R. At The Economist, most people use R more than Python, which I don't want to start a debate about it, but I think it works more. If you're on the pure data side, maybe Python can be more popular because it slots in better with the more developy side, but R kind of slots in better with the Viz side of things, I think, personally. And so that works really well for our setting, although we do also use Python for some things. So those are two great coding languages if you're interested in gathering data and kind of fulfilling that side of data journalism. There's obviously the interactive side too, so D3 for that and React are great, but there's so many different languages and tools. And the static visualization, so of course too, we have at The Economist we have an in-house Data Viz tool which works quite similar to other tools such as Data Wrapper, for example. So yeah, and then obviously we take the chart out of that tool and do kind of the last steps in Illustrator or whatever's appropriate for the chart type. So that's kind of our process, and those are kind of some of the tools we use. But I really think that almost all of the skills you can teach yourself or learn online. You just have to have that kind of self-discipline, unfortunately, to go through with it. If you don't, then paying for a course is a great option too.
Just want to add to that as well. I think, you know, if a lot of you are early in your career at practitioner level, technology is going to change. What I used 20 years ago is no longer relevant. So I think once you've got logical mind and you're able to, you know, get yourself technically adapt on any tool, you very quickly be able to transfer that to something else. But I'd say research what particular field you want to go into, whether it's data science, data engineering, you know, whether it's visualization. The tools in those industries are going to change and the lines are going to become sort of blurred. But I think, you know, stay up with the times, like you mentioned, see what the latest courses are, make sure you're continuously learning and evolving. And that's the best foundation you can have for your career. And then look at the industries and what sort of some of the tools that they use. But a lot of industries now, I find that it's not about the tool. Actually, it's about the individual and what can you bring more than you can. Obviously, you got your technical skills, but communication is also very important because we all need to be able to explain data to people that don't understand it. Even if you have the most amazing visualization, you need someone to explain it. So I'd say also work on your communication. It's going to be so important in your career.
That is so key, and I couldn't agree more. However, I'm going to play devil's advocate here. And specifically, Elizabeth, I wanted to know, as a developer, do you have like top 3 things that people can or should, in your opinion, learn if they want to get started in data visualization or transition? And I single you out just because I know like plenty of developers, and it's always so hard to like nitpick and decide, I'm going down this route, I'm going to do this in this way. What's your opinion about this? Like, would you recommend?
I think I said before, really, you have to sort of know what specific like niche field you might want to go into. So if you just start looking up job roles for like the kinds of jobs you want to have and see what skills they list, that can be your first project, is to figure out which language is most often said on those roles. I think Python right now is a big one if you're doing the more like technical statistical things. I learned R first, and that's like where I've built my knowledge off from. But I think, as we said, like the technologies change, and probably every couple of years, so a new one's going to take the lead. And once you know one, it's a lot easier to learn the others. It's just more of like, oh, this $sign is actually a colon, and this space needs to be an arrow. And so you learn how to translate between them. But I think either Python and R, and then some sort of like data warehousing, something like Snowflake or something along those lines, to know with SQL and pulling data out of places like that, I think a warehousing and a programming language, probably those two together, and you'll be okay.
Amazing. At the very beginning, this actually was one of the first questions somebody asked, was about portfolio. So we've been talking about struggles and like how to transition and what skills you need to learn. But now I guess we can move on to how do you make sure you are selling yourself, you're showing your work. So do you have any tips on how to prepare a portfolio for somebody who's getting started, for somebody who's maybe out there looking for a job, or just trying to build up an online presence, knowing how important that is nowadays? Maybe I want to start with Tiziana, just because I know that you have such a visual and like super exciting portfolio with like many different projects, and I'd be quite interested to hear a bit about that a bit more.
Yeah, so well, first of all, if you are in the case that maybe you don't have much project to showcase in your portfolio, maybe because you just graduated, because you are changing career, or maybe because just the organization when you work doesn't allow you to share the project, I always recommend to start a couple of side projects or self-initiated projects. They will take you very far. One of my self-initiated project was to start a magazine, and I did it with my friend Piero, and it started as a personal project, and it became the world's first independent magazine about data visualization, and we got a lot of work out of that. So and also the other tip is to only put in your portfolio the works that you want to do. So it doesn't really matter if you have 30 works to showcase or just 2, but as long as there are only things that you want to do, those are the works that you should select in your portfolio, because the people that are going to hire you are going to see your works and they will say, oh, you're doing this, so I want you to do this for me. If it's a project that you didn't really enjoy work on, just don't include it in your portfolio. So be very selective. And in terms of building a presence online, it's a little bit more difficult now. I'm trying it myself as well, but imposter syndrome to seeing such great, beautiful works made by so many designers out there. So just find your niche, find your tone of voice, your language, your message, and carry on. You never know what's going to happen.
Amazing. I do have an issue of that zine, and it's actually amazing. So people do go check it out. Honestly, it's brilliant. I'm mindful of the time. I cannot believe we've been here for 40 minutes already. It's so much discussion, so many things to cover. But I do want to make sure that we, beyond just like sharing anecdotes and maybe sharing tips, that we also talk about potential solutions. So I'm going to move us to a different topic. And first, I mean, we're doing this whole session about what, like, women in data and data visualization, but I want to ask you, like, what is the benefit of actually having more women in the field of data and data visualization? What would you say?
I can kick off. So I think it's really important, as we discussed, to have that gender parity in our industry. But I think we use data to influence lots of things we do in this industry. You know, there's in the data sets for every male analyst outnumbers females 4-1. So it calls into question the things we're developing in the consumer insights. What are the underlying assumptions when we're building models or taking into experience some of the things that only considers half the population? I'll give you an example of this to bring it to life. So I think if you think about some of the tech things that have been developed, like, for example, the first Apple Watch, for example, was designed by a man for a man, although it's selling to women. There's a seatbelt example as well. The seatbelts were designed with a man's kind of featuring that into several women. And then the Sophia, the robot, when that was designed, and high dimensions were designed so that they were just so abnormal, not the general female. There's things within the tech that is really important, that we have diverse sort of representation, because we're building and doing things and not having the representation to make sure. But also the most important thing is that most diverse organizations have high retention rates, that have lower employee turnover, and have more greater customer satisfaction. I think that's really important to sort of make sure the benefits of having women in data is.
Yeah, amazing. And if anybody attending wants to check it out, the book Invisible Women by Caroline Criado Perez covers the gender data gap, and basically the importance of having female representation, not only in the data, but also in the people collecting the data. And yeah, I mean, I kind of recommend that enough. And that is exactly what this discussion is about. I would like to know if any of you, can share perhaps one thing that, in your opinion, would improve the situation right now. Like, what can organizations, what can governments, what can people do to increase the female representation in the field? And maybe Marie, just because you're on the top of my screen, do you want to start?
Yeah, difficult question. I think hiring is honestly key to that. So changing your hiring practices. And I know that a lot of organizations have worked on that, especially in recent years, to increase their diversity, not just in terms of gender, but also in terms of class and color. So I think that is a really essential step. And if your organization isn't doing that yet, then, they should really get on it. But obviously, yeah, I mean, change is slow. And I think it's important that, we as women don't lose hope and keep pushing for it. I know that if you're someone who's trying to make that change in your organization, it can really wear you out. But that's why I think it's so good to talk to other women about it, like on this session. So, yeah.
Amazing. Stasi, I'm going literally square by square on my screen, so don't feel I'm not singling you out.
No problem. Yeah, I'm not sure, to be honest, what exactly could be done. I think I'm encouraged by this conversation just about, the shifts that have happened so far. And I guess I'm hopeful that they will continue. I think I'll go back to what I said earlier about, how you put forward a job description out into the world, and sort of being aware that it's encouraging to people who may not think that they have every skill, and so sort of making it clear that you can apply even if you don't have everything on there that's often missing from most job descriptions, and maybe even just making sure that little things like that are present would encourage a wider field of applicants. I think change is slow, so nothing's going to kind of change overnight, and there's of course different factors that feed into it. But I think just encouraging conversation about it in an organization, and pointing out if there are very large differences, and sort of trying to do what you can working with hiring managers to see if job descriptions are written in a way that are approachable. I think that would be a great step.
Great. Tiziana, do you want to go next?
Yeah, sure. So I think encouraging transparency would be nice. Transparency that starts from the hiring process, which are the hiring criteria, who's hiring, for example, and who's making the final decision. Salary negotiation, again, even encouraging conversation within organizations, talking about how much money we make. That will help a lot, also having these kind of conversations with your managers. Even at educational level, university or even high school, encourage a little bit more of professional side of the design of business or the business of design. So learning how to work, which questions to ask when you approach an interview, because most of the times we don't know, and I'm also talking about men and women. This is a broader conversation. But I would say yes, transparency and also setting examples. I think now companies, organizations have the power to set examples. So if they pursue the right path, other companies will follow. So that will be maybe a nice thing to do as well.
Right. Kinnari, do you want to go next?
Yeah, sure. I think organisations to create a networking support events, if they haven't really got a sort of diversity board, that's really important, because internally you can come together as women and sort of just kind of make sure you have these open conversations. And I think that really helps. I've seen that significantly help women around the organisation when they have got a network to go to. transparency of career path is really important. I think people sometimes think they've hit the glass ceiling. There is no glass ceiling, in my opinion. You've got to navigate that, and why should it be so hard? So I think employers can make sure there's transparency of where careers can go, and what the availability is to them as well. And last, I think I've mentioned already, I think providing mentors or coaches in an organization will also significantly help employees as well. And it could be reverse mentoring as well, so that you're able to sort of break down any barriers that may already exist there.
And last but certainly not least, Elizabeth.
I think the other panelists have mentioned a lot of like what to do right now in the actual job field. And I think like a more long-term approach to add would be that a lot of times there's this like bias in early education of where kids start to say, oh, I'm not a math person, I am a math person. And that I see, as we've talked about, we lose at every transition point, you know, to college, to the career, we're losing women. So I think having better programming at younger ages that encourages girls to go into more technical fields. So if you have kids or your friends have kids, look into groups like Girls Who Code or things like that, and encourage and support that from a young age. And then hopefully in the future, we'll have more applicants to these jobs so that we can hire from them.
Amazing. You have no idea how many questions we have in the Q&A, so I do want to try and answer all of them. Before I move to the proper Q&A section of the webinar, I do want to, again, ask all of you one single question. If you could please give one single advice for any woman or girl starting in data visualization, what would it be? What would be your golden tip for anybody just getting started?
I think, so I worked a lot with social media at the beginning, and I think for me, it's been a really great accelerator to my career. So my advice would definitely be to shout about your work, even if you're a student. You know, if you've just done your first bar chart, post it on Twitter or, you know, Instagram or whatever platform you feel most comfortable on, LinkedIn. You might not be comfortable on all platforms, that's fine. You can just pick one, but do it on one, you know, and try to really grow confidence and grow an audience on there. So for me, Twitter worked really well. I know it's currently a house on fire, but we'll see. I know that other more visual people are amazing on Instagram and have tons of followers there. So it's a great platform too. And then I think personally, it's kind of part two to my tip. I talked a lot about my work outside of my organization. And more recently, I've realized that I need to talk more about my work inside my organization too. So yeah, that would be my tip. Talk more about what you do, even if you're just getting started.
Great, and could not agree more. I'm going to do the rounds again. So Nastasia?
Sure. Yeah, I think mine links to yours, Marie. I might have to take your advice a bit more forwards myself, posting on social media, etc. I do not do that at all. But yeah, I definitely think that could be a beneficial thing to do, and to get into the habit of feeling comfortable with it. This, you know, it's not such a scary thing. I think I'll bridge that and say, my top tip would, you know, be vocal. Reach out to people if you are feeling like you want to get involved in the data community. Find somebody to talk to if you find that and then ask for their advice. If you have just got into the data community but you're feeling a little bit like a fish out of water, again, be vocal, talk to people around you, ask them questions if you're unclear. Don't feel like you, just because you don't know something, that's the worst thing. Just starting out, I didn't know like a tiny percentage of what I know now. I think your career is mostly just about, you know, getting into a new experience and then acting in that experience, and then seeing, okay, that's what you do in that experience, and then you can take that forwards for others that come. And you've sort of finished it when you get new experiences come at you and you know what to do instantly, but you're not going to get that from the beginning. So just don't feel uncomfortable when you don't know what to do, and don't assume that you're stupid just because you don't know how to do something. Don't be afraid to ask for someone's advice to help you.
Great. Tiziana?
Yeah, so I think find your own voice, and then also find the space where your voice can be heard. It could be social media. I'm quite present on Instagram, for example. I find it good. It's very visual, so it works very well with the work that I do. And but more than anything, just do it. If you think that you like this industry, just do it. You got it. You have all the skills to make it. Just do it. It's much easier to do it than think about it. So sometimes we need to take the courage to just make the move. But when it's done, it's done. So my advice would be to just do it.
Kinnari?
Yeah, I mean, anyone that is considered a career in data, I'd say is definitely made the right choice, because I think there's never been a better time than now. I'll just say that there's a skill shortage in this data professional, and it's most sought after roles in a lot of organizations. So it's the right place to start. My one piece of advice would be, don't compare yourself to others. Do what you do, and that's what's going to make you different, and it's going to make you stand out from the crowd, whether it's your communication style, whether it's the way you deliver projects, whether it's the way you code, your visualization. I think every one of us has got something unique, and believe in that and let that grow, and I think you'll realize that that's what makes you successful. And whether that's a value of yours that you abide by, I think the most important thing to remember is we can't help but do this, but if you do compare yourself to others, think about what are the elements that you do like about that individual, and take that and learn about how you can be like that, those skills, or what makes you stand out from that person. So don't let that hold you back, is my sort of piece of advice.
Great. Elizabeth?
I'll go more like short term for when you're trying to like build a portfolio or learn a new skill, is to pick a topic that you already have some interest and knowledge in. So if you say, oh, I'm going to work on financial data for a hospital, well, if you don't know anything about that, it's going to be hard to have that intuition of like, I should check these variables and measure this thing. So work on analyzing Taylor Swift lyrics if that's what you know a lot about. Because when you're interested in it, you're more willing to spend the time to learn a new skill, to get that one specific detail that you want to get to. So start with the things you're interested in and go from there.
That's a great piece of advice from all of you. Thank you so much. I want to say that we're wrapped up with the conversation section. And again, we do have a lot of Q&A stack up. So thank you, everybody who've submitted questions so far. I'm just going to go over a couple of them and see if we can tackle them. So any that I mentioned, just like feel free to jump in and tackle that. So we've been talking a lot about like industry and women, but we haven't talked a lot about data visualization per se. So I'm going to start with what are the biggest trends in data visualization that excites you?
Well, I'll start. So this is a bit of a complex question for me. I find it hard to find something new that really excites me. I guess all this conversation about AI and the role that AI will play in pretty much every industry, apparently, is something that grabs my attention. So I don't know how it's going to impact my job, if it ever will, if it's gonna simplify maybe my job or not. So I'm just keeping an eye on what's going on and following from distance. But it's going to become a trend inevitably.
Yeah, I think along those lines is the conversation around like AI and data ethics. As we talked about before, if there's bias in the data going into a model, then there's going to be bias coming out. And I think we're at a really big tipping point about what we're going to do about these things. And so if you're interested in those topics, like that's big right now.
Amazing. I'm going to move on to something quite similar, which is any tips for making sure that your data visualizations are outstanding among others? And I guess in this room of like trying to make room for women and like trying to stand out, anything you can think about for people to maybe make sure that their charts are more jazzy than others?
Personally, I would say that often less is more. So I think what really catches our eye as like a data journalist or at The Economist are if you can really strip it back and like deliver the greatest amount of information in the simplest, most straightforward way. So I think maybe my advice would be to not think about adding more, but thinking about how to do more with less.
So you're not a fan of the 3D pie charts then? Are any of you fans of the 3D charts at this point? Amazing. Yeah, I mean, I guess this is quite related and something that Kinnari mentioned, which is the tools change and trends change. So how do you make sure that you actually learn the skills that are going to be long term? And if anybody wants to wrap that up with short answer, jump in, because that was one of the questions.
I'd just add to that, Murph, is that with whatever the visualization or the tool, make sure you're answering the question that's been asked from your client or your customer or the business question. Sometimes we get so engrossed in creating the most amazing visualization, we forget to answer the question, the exam question that's been asked. So always go back to making sure you're answering the question. If you can give more, amazing, but always go back to what the main reason of the sort of the main aim of that visualization was. That would be my advice.
Amazing.
If I may follow up with one very quick piece of advice, is to always take in consideration who you're speaking to, because we are not designing for ourselves, and this will usually happens is that we make a chart because we believe that's understandable enough, and we forget about who are the recipients of these charts, visualization, or product. So always try to make sure you know who you're speaking to, you know your audience, and how your audience wants to receive information.
Amazing. Some of you mentioned the importance of community, connecting, and specifically finding mentors. And I've been spotting a couple of questions around how can people find mentors? Where can people find mentors? Whether you yourself could be mentors for people attending this session. So any tips on that area that you can share? Like, how did you find your mentors, or what's a good tip for approaching somebody? Does it have to be from within the industry? Do you email them, or send them like a LinkedIn request and then hope for the best? Like, what's the way to go?
What I've personally done, I've sort of sought out within the organization. That's helped. That weren't necessarily within the field of data. I think it depends what you're trying to seek advice from, or where you need the sort of coaching or mentoring. There are lots of organizations out there. There's a lot of recruitment organizations that also have mentoring schemes, so they sort of spin this up. There's quite a few out on LinkedIn that do this as a sideline. Women in Data is a big organization that I'm part of as well. There are over 2,000 or 4,000 women in that network now, so there's sort of many places. But I think, if it's easier, start with internally organization, but you can be part of many other communities like this one here, where you can probably reach out to somebody, and I'd say, yeah, drop an email or just send something like that. The worst they can say is no, and you've just built up confidence to ask the next person.
Amazing. I do have a couple of people specifically asking about mentorship in data journalism. So Marie, is there anything you want to say? Are you a mentor yourself?
I do mentor a lot, yeah. Internally in our organization, we have a mentoring scheme, but I also am a mentor for my old university, for Goldsmiths College. But there's other programs too. So there's that are maybe less data specific, but for journalism in general, there's obviously Women in Journalism who run a great mentoring program. There's also a mentoring program from Second Source, they're called. I don't know if it's still the organization still exists. I don't know if the mentoring program is currently up and running because COVID obviously disrupted things. There's not really a specific data mentoring program for data journalism. There's another website called Women Leaders, I think, that is run by women in journalism, and they work kind of across lots of different sections. So there's some people on there who are in data journalism, and that's kind of for one-off mentoring conversations. So that's a great resource too. And then for personal coaching, there's someone who once came to Hackers, I think. My so-called career, I think. And they run a really great sort of coaching program that I participated in. So I think those are all which is paid for. The others are all free. But yeah, those are some resources I would personally recommend.
Amazing. I'm mindful of the time, so any of you want to have, like, I don't know, some last words before I wrap up the session? The floor is yours. I mean, we've been discussing quite a lot in this past hour, so more than fair to want to have a break. Yes, so we're just overrunning for a couple of minutes. Thank you so much to all 5 of you. This was incredibly engaging, interesting, super important topic, great ideas. I'm left with be yourself, don't compare yourself to others, speak up. Also, just, I guess, right? It's like, just do the thing. If you want to do it, get started. Choose something you're interested in to learn the skills. That's a really good one. So I'm sure, and I really hope that our attendees are also taking notes from all the great tips and advice that you've shared. To anybody who didn't have the chance to basically have a live transcription of the session, because we've shared a lot, we are going to answer some of the questions that were unanswered live on an email. We're going to send the recording as well, and perhaps we will collect some of the resources that were mentioned here today, so you all have them on your emails. So don't worry, we'll try to cater as much as we can. We do invite you to join the Data Visualization Society and the Slack channel, because that is really rich in terms of resources, community, finding fellow data visualization practitioners, potentially mentors, colleagues, collaborators, resources, maybe even peer reviewing your work. Like, honestly, I've seen everything and anything on the Slack. So it's a really rich community, and it'd be amazing to have you. Thank you so much for joining us today. Once again, thank you to all speakers for your time and your wisdom. And yeah, it's been great.